Hello people, before I begin I want to just say, as I do in every single video, that these videos are informed by something called the law of free will, which basically means that I will state my best understanding and belief, but I'm not stating this as a truth that other people are expected to believe. Everybody has their own uniqueness, individuality, tendencies, and this is simply my truth, not necessarily everyone's truth. I've realised that my emotions around a guy called David Wilcock, which I previously covered, are, well, they're not good. I used to believe David for years and years, like I properly believed he had insiders, I properly believed it all. I alienated people because I talked about his beliefs and later on for a short while Corey Good, until I snapped out of Corey Good belief. On a logical level, if you were to look at beliefs such as the idea that we all have life programming and all that kind of stuff like positive entities working with us to work out the best result, or as the Christians call it, God works all things for good. On that level, I could say to myself, well, I was very ill previously, and so in practical terms, it might have been better for me to have been fooled and distracted rather than to have engaged in an illness that I couldn't change and possibly find even more delusional beliefs. There is quite a lot to say here, I think, about not just David and the law of one, but about almost every tiny bit of power, every tiny bit of positivity or power is eventually taken by someone negative and used in a non-positive way. It's just the way the world is. With the law of one, well, the law of one created genuine belief in extraterrestrials, genuine insight into a lot of very amazing things, but then it also allowed this unbelievable culture of grifters. And then later on, you get someone like Steve Cambion coming along to tear them all down. It's a very similar thing with the Bible. The Bible and Christianity are one of the bigger powers that you see in this world. And a lot of people have taken Christian beliefs, Christian principles, and used them for emotional blackmail, things like that, personal agendas. I just wanted to cover one more thing here then. This is one thing that I didn't cover during the eclipse video that I did previously. I did a video on David Wilcock and the eclipse. Going back to 2017 then, we see that Uranus was in the gate 3.3. Now there is a little that I have to say about this transit that brings in an entirely new set of theories, a new set of thoughts or things or ponderances. I think that Uranus was the Trump, Farage, UKIP, all of that sort of right-wing leaning, and also the QAnon leaning. And part of the reason I say this is because the second that Uranus entered Aries in 2012, that was when Trump first ran, and then in 2013 UKIP gained popularity by winning European elections, and later on, in the same month that Uranus first made its transit into Taurus, which was, I think, April 1st. I can't remember the year, but it was Theresa May that was in Downing Street. In that same month, we both had Mercury retrograde, and then we officially left the European Union. In practice, of course, it's more complicated than that, but that was the year that the paperwork was put forward and we were officially out of the European Union. So I believe quite strongly that Uranus, when its transit is political, with all of that kind of stuff, with Trump, with Farage, and also with QAnon. Now, remember, QAnon came onto the scene, I think, in early 2017, and by this eclipse in August of 2017, it was in full swing, meaning that I believe that QAnon popularity, that QAnon enthusiasm was one of the things that gave David at the time a bit of support, David and Corey, a bit of support to believe a lot of this stuff, which isn't really that objective. The QAnon theories in general tend to be a bit of a break from objective reality. All this codes, like, I believe it's legitimate, but all of these codes and all of this weirdness, it isn't that psychologically healthy. It's like being over reliant on dream interpretation. Now, there is a personal transit of Uranus, which is obviously more helpful to us on the personal level. The Law of One did speak very much against this kind of political and transient material. And in general, I find that a Uranus transit for oneself is articulating information in a way that explains a spiritual, or personal rather, truth to people that then implies that a change of behaviour is needed. And often that change of behaviour is rejected, since everything beyond Saturn, Uranus, Neptune and Pluto, tends to be rejected by normies, so to speak. But what I think is important to notice here is that I don't think Uranus was the one that was pushing these things, the Trump, the QAnon and all of that. I think the way the transit works is that humans attached this energy to transiting Uranus, and then it reflected in people's charts where it showed. So I've said that I have the gate 3, and this is quite a prominent place in my chart. It's quite relevant to socializing. While Uranus was going over that gate 3 and held all this QAnon sort of energy, that went onto that gate 3 of mine, and it wasn't until later that I undid that, as I talked about in the Perspective on Transits video. So a big part of what I think QAnon have been doing, and a big part that I'm sure that they're aware of with whatever tools that they have at their disposal, and whatever connection with positive entities they have at their disposal, I think a big part of them withdrawing from the scene is so that people become more psychologically healthy and don't rely on QAnon at all. Because QAnon, even though it was a very positive thing in a sense, it gave people hope, it is actually very psychologically unhealthy at the same time. This is one thing I think people get wrong quite a lot, especially normies, but even people that are in those communities but don't agree with that area might get wrong. Just because something is true doesn't mean it's healthy. I could go to a serial killer, I could listen to all the horrible things that he's done to people and, cutting up people and all that kind of stuff. That is truth, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be psychologically healthy for me. And when people are trying to push back on conspiracy theories, they're trying to say to people, look, what you believe might not be correct. Whereas often those conspiracy theorists are of the kind of mindset that they're so unbelievably paranoid that they have checked their sources. Not only have they checked their sources, but they've listed their sources in such a way because they're paranoid about that kind of thing coming towards them. They're paranoid about being accused of not checking their sources. So when someone comes along and says you should stay away from conspiracy theory because it's not real, well, that's not going to help. But the idea that you should stay away from conspiracy theories because even if they are correct, they're not healthy for you, that's a different argument. But then what's happening here? Well, we see quite an interesting Mercury retrograde. We see it retrograding from the gate 3.1, which means that the gate 3 is the energy that's primarily being rejected before earlier steps can be worked on to go back there. I hope this is not all too complicated. I imagine it is for a few people, but this is a human design chart channel, and the human design chart is very complicated. We have Mercury having gone retrograde on April 1st. It went Kazemi on April 11th when we got these new shifts of Neptune and Pluto, which I've talked about ad verbatim. And then it goes direct on the same day that David is trying to raise money with Corey Good in the gate 51.1. You couldn't make that up, honestly. That's too complex to go into in depth, although I will say that it is David's Chiron. How I think this will manifest then is that as Mercury goes retrograde, people are really undoing a lot of the crap that they got from QAnon and Corey and the rest of it, and that we might see that this reflects on David's Chiron, his wound, his point where things get so traumatic that he has to withdraw. Perhaps this will be that his new course that he's advertising, and he hopes probably will get him out of financial distress, will not go as well as he hopes. And yeah, so that's just a thought. Anyway, thank you for listening.